Welcome to the Make Space for Growth podcast. My name is Sara Vicente, and I'm your host. I'm a corporate strategist, problem solver, social entrepreneur, mom of two, and for 2024, embracing my portfolio life. For this year, explore is my word of the year. As I morphed from corporate life surrounded by everything else into a portfolio life of everything else, I am looking to redefine, refine, and reimagine my portfolio. After a year that brought light in the form of opening a new phase of my life, I am now at peace to explore. This is the year to discover, imagine, dream what I am and want to be. It is the year where maybe I do try and write my own bio, my own story that is not attached to what I do, but to what I am. It is the year to face the fears of what I am not or may never be, and the year to garner the courage for what I want and can be. I hope we can explore together the lives and beings of our guests, learning from them and bringing a sense of questioning and exploration into our own lives. Today, I'm bringing a woman investor to start the year, who also shared a short stint with me at Morgan Stanley, though we did not connect back then. Her career has a few turns, which we will discuss, and more importantly, I think you'll love hearing about her investment philosophy and what she's doing in the space. Let's hear about Carmen. Carmen is a VC turned angel at Cocoa, an angel fund backed by tech founders. Cocoa invests angel checks into European pre-seed and seed companies and supports founders as their in-house VC. Previously, she was a part of a fund Blossom and a very active angel, having done more than 20 angel investors. Carmen was the first investor in Hopin, and she also wrote the first check in SideQuest VR, Outverse, and Service, amongst others. Carmen looks for killers with a heart and likes to invest in business with insane customer love. She looks for businesses solving a very painful pain, supported by super engaged communities where members have almost an emotional connection with the product or experience and a strong sense of belonging. B2B and B2C companies that are almost a cult for their own users because they're highly scalable and defensible. Pre-investing, Carmen started her career in politics. Isn't that a way to spike your curiosity? Let's dive into it. Carmen, welcome to the Make Space for Growth podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So before we talk business, may I ask you, what was your favorite thing to do as a child and what did you want to be when you grew up?
Okay, I love that question. When I was little, I always wanted to be US Secretary of State, which is interesting given that I'm not US national. I think you need to be a US citizen to be a Secretary of State of the US, which also makes sense. One, it shows I was a big fan of like geopolitics more than like politics, and I love the West Wing, you know, the TV show, and also I just thought anything was possible because I could be Secretary of State of a country I was in a national law. And so that's that. Back then it was Madeleine Albright, Secretary of State, and she was actually not US born. She was a Czech national, but like I totally admire her job. Like it was just fascinating to me. So I wanted to be Secretary of State of the United States. And then what was my favorite thing? I think my favorite thing when I was little was to go out for dinner, which pretty much still like with my grandfather and my parents, like, but mainly with my grandfather, but my parents would come along and I thought that was cool as well. They're all from Spain and they love restaurants, which is a passion that I still keep. And so I remember this prospect of knowing that I was gonna go out for dinner. It was really like the anticipation, almost the dinner as well, but the anticipation, I think that was one of my favorite memories. And actually, no, I'll say another one that's for Christmas, and just because I think my favorite thing as a child was the Three Kings. And I'm going to explain what this is. It's a very Spanish tradition. And we still celebrate at home. But basically in Spain, there's Santa Claus now because, like, you know, like commercialization and like globalization. But generally, and still, you get Christmas gifts on January 6th, which is the Three Kings, because the Three Kings visited baby Jesus with gifts. And so in whole of Spain, the 5th, there are all these parades. Like, and you have got like, it's like this whole basically massive conspiracy to make kids happy. And because you believe that these three kings come from Bethlehem, and like they bring gifts, and like you prepare the tables for them for dinner, and you, it doesn't matter if you live on a seventh floor, but you put water for the camels, because you know the camels are gonna make it to the seventh floor. I don't know how. And like there's this whole like wonder, amusement, like joy that night. It's literally a magic night. And for some reason and somehow a country has kept it, and so we still celebrate it, and there's still the whole thing. And you wake up on the 6th, and there's all these gifts, and like everybody comes together for breakfast and eats chocolate, like drinks chocolate, and everybody comes together for dinner. It's like a literally magic, joyful night. I think that was my favorite thing as a kid, and it's still my favorite. So credit to my parents for keeping like the magic going.
That's a big one, and you just had it, so it's I'm sure it was
Yes,
a celebration.
I totally. It's like I did my Christmas don't stop till after the Three Kings, and even when we were little, we went to boarding school, and my mom's very strict. The teachers are always right. Like we were never right, except for the Three Kings. She would always fake certificates that we were sick, because in Germany and in the States, we went to boarding school. They would start school on like 2nd or 3rd of January, and the Three Kings is the 6th. So my mom always got her friends, the doctors, to sign that we were sick, so that we could be home on the 6th. Literally, there's not been a single January 6th we haven't been on.
We need to decide whether we keep this part in or out of the podcast.
My mom's fine. Like, she's obsessed with the Three Kings. She'll be happy. She's okay. It's like forgery.
Not to ruin your mom's reputation. Funny enough, you said you wanted to be the US Secretary of State, but you did start your career in politics. And I think that's a little bit of a first here at the podcast. And given you're in such a different place today, which we'll talk about, how did that first experience shape you into the rest?
It's a very good question. I came into politics very randomly, as in like I never thought of being a politician. I was not a member of any party. I came from a very political family in the sense that we discussed a lot, and we, I watched the West Wing and like the whole thing. But I never thought I was gonna be in politics, and definitely not my first job. What happened was that it was the time when Spain basically Spain's risk premium was at 300, 400 basis points. We were being rescued, like, the pigs, the debt crisis, the whole thing. And randomly, the president of Congress in Spain saw my grades, whatever, like I studied a lot and I got good grades. And so she actually, as you do in Spain, instead of reaching out to me, reached out to my dad and asked him, like, if I would like to join. And my dad actually thankfully said, well, you should ask her directly, like, she should make that decision. And basically, I just thought that it was a job you don't apply to. And I stayed there for a couple of years. It was a fascinating time, very tough time, but fascinating because there was all the reforms on education, the reforms on healthcare, and you see how much impact you can have, right? Like every decision you make at that level has massive impact in massive people. But the challenge to me was that it's probably, if you like it, a great place to end your career, but not so much to start it, because I felt that, and I'm speaking about my experience in Spain, it didn't have the structures to manage talent and to grow talent. So I was learning to be a politician, but if you wanted to be something else, it was going to be really hard, right? Except for one thing, and this finally answers your question, I guess the most transferable skill I learned, which actually applies in venture as well, is that both industry spaces are very human driven. They're very driven by human nature, right? And human incentives. And I think that in politics, I learned a lot to manage that human nature, to manage those kind of human incentives, and to navigate them, to get people on board with what you want to do. And so I think that was probably the most useful kind of skill.
There's the human element, but you also recognize, the structure to develop talent is an important one, which not every place has it. And also the impact, which, we're probably going to talk a little bit about. So then you moved to London, you went to banking, and we kind of virtually crossed paths even, and you joined the VC world. How do you go from politics in Spain in the middle of the pigs crisis? And I still don't know who came up with that lovely name, because I'm the P in pigs, right? Yeah, so I'm part of the name. And then you're like, right, finance, London. How does that happen?
So basically, my line is definitely not a straight line. Like I think, and this I guess for anybody listening, and when you looked at a LinkedIn and you see, oh my God, it's so great and it all makes so much sense. Nothing makes sense while you're doing it. It's like backwards. It makes like it looks sense. It makes sense, but it doesn't on the spot. Basically, when I realized that in politics, I wasn't learning much except how to be a politician, and that I want to limit my scope so much, I looked at my friends. They were all in banking and in consulting, and I also really liked how they were learning to analyze problems, like the basically mental frameworks they were getting, the thinking critically. And so I thought I had to do that, and basically came to London to serve my time at Morgan Stanley. I mean, think about it, in politics, I was quite, it's ridiculous thing, like, but I was like quite senior advisor, even though I was very young. And then I came to be an analyst at Morgan Stanley, which is the bottom of the food chain, right? Like literally, like it's like
I was going to ask about that.
Oh, I mean, I used to. So my mother, she works in government, and she's a lawyer. And I would call her from my office when I was in politics, and her assistant would get all scared. They're calling from the cabinet. They're calling, and she was like, "It's the no worries, it's Carmen, it's a girl." And then at Morgan Stanley, like I was literally like, I mean, if anybody picked up my phone internally, I was the luckiest person on the earth, right? And now it was the best. It was probably the best, like in hindsight, like one of the best decisions professionally and personally that I ever took. I think that personally it meant I moved to London. That was like 11 years ago. It's my home, it's my city. I want to stay here. It's like I have a love affair with London. I found myself and my home here. But also professionally, I loved it actually. People, like, I understand. So I don't think it's a place I would have liked to stay forever, but it was incredible school for 3 years. I did investment banking for 3 years. I learned how to project management, prioritize. I learned attention to detail. I mean, I can spot a double space from like 5 meters away, right?
Everybody quotes that.
Honestly, it's like
it's unbelievable.
Or seizing people in the right order. Like I think I still have nightmares that you forget to CC one MD, right? But the point on this, which is I guess the thing that I took from there, right? I mean, there are crazy stories of me like at 4 a.m. changing colors on a call. I remember one MD was in Belgium, Brussels. The other MD was in Paris, and there was a third MD that was gonna bring the books, like the pitch, the egg to Paris. And so the two, one in Paris and Belgium, were fighting whether the arrow should be yellow or blue. And I was like changing them like that. But the point that I took from all these situations, on top of a lot of resilience and understanding that you have to do a lot of monkey work sometimes, is that it matters. Like the attention to detail, like the formatting, maybe not the orange versus the blue, but the formatting, the making sure that there are no typos, the making sure that like you get the product right, that it has a very high level of quality, matters to the client because they're trusting you. And I apply this to both founders and LPs at Cocoa, is that in the case of Cocoa LPs, you're trusting me with your money. So you bet that anything that comes out of Cocoa is going to be the highest quality standard that I can do, because I take your trust very seriously. It doesn't mean that I'm going to not do anything else. I'm not trying, of course, like there's this combination of a big workload that you have, but a very high quality output, because that shows how like you actually respect the task. And so that's another thing that's like, and I guess the third thing that I learned at Morgan Stanley, which was very useful, is to push back and to sometimes like be ruthless. I will always remember, and actually I never named them. I'm gonna name them today. I went to my first speech about Morgan Stanley. I had been there for like less than a year, and two associates, so were older than me, got me into a room and said, "You need to toughen up." This was Bex and Tambi. I'll never forget. And they said me, I was like, "You're really great. You do things really well. People are gonna take advantage of you if you do not stop them. So you need to toughen up, and you need to start saying, it's not my problem. Great, sir. Like, oh, sorry, I wish I could help, but I have other things that are actually my problem. So this is where you look at it. That instead of like having some French team asking you for something when you're not in that team, and you stay until 3 a.m. to do it for them. And it was so interesting, and it's been like kind of this struggle / balance that I've seeked throughout my career. How are you ruthless yet still kind, right? And still yourself. And it's this balance of like, how do you don't let people take advantage of you? How do you go and push for what you want to get it, while remaining like a kind person, like a caring person, a loyal person. And this is also where this whole concept of killer with a heart with cocoa comes in, is that like that's what like I strive to be, and that is what I want to back, is these people who are machines, and they're ruthless when you need to be, because business is business and sometimes you need to be ruthless, but at the same time they have the heart at the right place, right? And I think that at Morgan Stanley is the first place where I realized that being kind doesn't mean let people take advantage of you. It's just like,
Yeah.
it was a good learning, right? And so yeah, like I
It's
love
quite
that.
impressive you've learned that in your first 3 years, because it
Bex
sometimes takes a few years to people.
and Tambi. Actually, I remember I came back from that ski trip, and my VP, which is two levels above, told them, like, what did you do to her? Because he used to take so much advantage of me. And then when I came back from the ski trip, I was like, ah, no, you do that. Like, it's not my job. Or then they were like, no, but you're like gonna be like a VP. I always remember they moved me to teams, these things. And there's like, no, it's a great opportunity. You're gonna be like a VP. You're gonna get the job. And I was like, okay, so wait.
Paid like an analyst.
Exactly. I'm like, I'm gonna have the job of a VP, the amount of job, the responsibility. I'm gonna go on the shit basically of a VP, but you're gonna pay me like an analyst, and my title is gonna be like an analyst. I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. I told the MD actually, and he years after told me, I'll never forget this. I was like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna not create any drama. Do not worry. I'm gonna do all the work, but at least I want you to know that I know this is not a great thing. Like, as in, you are tricking me and you're asking me for a favor, which I'm gonna do, but let's call the things by their name. And he was like, yeah, you're totally right. I was like, okay. That moment I felt I grew up.
Yeah, it's not a favor. It's you owe me at some point.
And it's okay, by the way, and let's all agree to do it. Let's call the things by their name, and let's all kind of respect each other enough to actually call the things by their name, and accept them, and it's fine. Like, like it doesn't, but at least we know where we stand. And so, but the thing with Morgan Stanley, also I met wonderful people and went out like crazy. It was so much fun. Like, I mean, banking in our times, it was really fun. Good that I was younger, because I don't know how I managed, but the thing was, I always wanted to be a founder. I come from a family of entrepreneurs. My dad has his companies. My grandfather had his companies, and I always thought I was going to be a founder. And so now my problem, as with the US, as you say, I like kind of unachievable goals, like US Secretary of State, then founder in tech, and I don't code. So I'm not technical, and I didn't have a network of technical people, because like Morgan Stanley was very banking, and I didn't have a great idea either. And so what I thought, I didn't know, this is how crazy it is. I didn't know VC existed. When I first came into Morgan Stanley, I didn't know there was anything called VC and that people gave money to tech companies. I had no clue. And now I cannot imagine what else do with my life. And like 10 years ago, I didn't know it existed. And a friend of mine did an MBA. I was doing an MBA at MIT and was doing an internship at Matrix Partners. And she told me about it. And I was like, wait, so there's like finance and tech together? And I was like, this is perfect, because another big assumption that didn't work out, but not as I expected it. It's like, I was like, perfect. So I do 2 years of VC. I learn what makes companies succeed and what makes companies fail. Little did I know it takes 10 years. I was like, 2 years, I get a full playbook. And then I built a network. And then I become a founder. And so basically that was my plan. I joined Felix Capital. I will forever and ever be grateful to Antoine, who gave me my first chance in venture, which wasn't a straightforward chance, because I wasn't technical. I was doing investment banking, non-tech, by the way. I was doing financial institutions. And he gave me a shot before they even launch Felix, and it was what got me into the door. So he knows that. I tell him personally, but I will be forever grateful. I joined Felix. I stayed there for 2 years, and then I got my plan, which was, now I'm a founder. And so I built a consumer startup very influenced by Felix. It was a direct-to-consumer brand, and my co-founder was in New York. We sold from my living room here in London, and I realized, this is the most unexpected aha moment, that I missed investing. I realized that I was an operator. I was missing a lot the variety of founders you meet, the variety of problems they solve, learning about things that I didn't know existed. And basically, I guess, like, if they would have asked me theoretically, given how much I had studied in the past, I would have never, if they would have asked me, what do you like? depth over breadth, or breadth or depth. I would have said depth, 100%. And actually I realized that I rather know a little about a lot. I went back into investing. I haven't looked back since. It's my favorite thing in the world. I cannot imagine what else I would do. And yeah, that's how I got then back into VC. And then the next story is how I go from VC to angel, and like backwards. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
No, that's an interesting story, and you actually were able to find out very quickly that you were not an operator and that you preferred the breadth, because a lot of times people don't really know what's wrong and they just think it's the business, and then they go try and do another one and they do another one, and but actually it is a big difference. And I've had this conversation myself, in the last few years, because I was in a strategy role, and then I do this business angel investments. And sometimes I feel like, oh, I'm the type of person that likes to know things deeply. But then I'm like, well, but I'm also the type of person that likes to know a lot of things. And so one is always fighting the other. But in the end, I still like more things rather than depth. And that's something, it's a hard decision, because you come from banking and I come from banking. And in banking, you know everything until the last detail. And so getting comfortable with not doing that is very difficult.
I totally agree. I think it's so interesting actually when you look at like the career journey. It's so much about accepting kind of what you really like and what you're really good at versus what you think you need to like. Like when you like I studied law and business, and then I did politics, but then I went to Morgan Stanley, right? And then like after Morgan Stanley you move into the buy side and get into something, and the same with like going from VC to angel rather than angel to VC. But it's that like I like both things, but if I have to choose, which one do I choose? Like I actually choose variety. Now the thing that closed the loop for me though, which took years to close the loop, and now when I look back, is I was not an operator, but yes, I was a founder. Like as in I want to be a founder. I enjoy being the founder of Cocoa. Like I enjoy that. It's just the content itself for me is the investor content. Is not operating very focused one set of related problems and going very deep into that. So it's actually interesting how even those learnings about yourself like evolve and then like close the loop, because when I told the story before Cocoa, I used to say I'm not a founder, like I'm an investor. And now I'm like, well, I'm a founder and an investor, I'm just not an operator.
Yeah, for sure. And it is different, and it is a path that you need to be kind of open to it, because you do go from a very structured place to then trying to find it out. And so, you've told us already, you start in VC, and then you become a business angel. And sometimes it goes the other way around, right? People test out if they like investing, being a business angel, and then they go VC. How did that journey work backwards to you? I think you've hinted a little bit by saying actually you've always wanted to be a founder, so you put both things together. But more than a founder, you're a business angel fund type of investment. Can you tell us a little bit of how that worked out?
100%. And actually, the same way that I earlier said, moving to Morgan Stanley was a very structured decision of I want to serve my time. And then moving to BC was a very structured decision of, I want to learn to be a better founder. Actually, the going from VC to angel was complete serendipity. Basically, what happened is I was a partner in a seed fund, and a business angel called Andrew Weitz asked me to be the founder as a favor. I couldn't invest because it was out of scope. This founder was pre-launch, but Andrew asked me, can you go meet him and just tell me what you think? And there I went. This founder was Johnny from Hopin. Back then he was raising his pre-seed. I don't know if people are familiar with Hopin's story, but basically grew very, very fast, and then like it slowed. But the point being, back then he was raising 250K, and he was struggling to raise his pre-seed because it was events. This is pre-COVID. It was like online events and live streaming and ticketing. There's models that people were not really fond of back then. And I got fascinated by him. I absolutely loved the product he built. And I wanted to help him. I couldn't lead the round, but I wanted to help him. And I helped him doing what I know how to do, which is very obviously being a VC. But instead of from the position of a lead, I helped him as a tiny angel. And basically what that sort of translated in was I introduced him to every investor he met. Every single investor that invested in that pre-seed, from seed come to my family, I introduced him to. I review his term sheet. I help him with lawyers. I build the actual Excel spreadsheet of the cap table, like all these things that were literally my day job, but for him were new because his day job was to build a product, right? And so by doing that, and this is kind of the aha moment and the very origin of Cocoa, by doing that, what I realized was I was building a very unique relationship of trust with him. And I figured in my mind it had to do with the fact that on one side I was tiny in his cap table, like literally insignificant basically. But on the other hand, I knew all the tricks of VCs. I knew who they were, I knew how they work, I knew how they thought, everything, because I was one of them. And so I could help him bridge the gap. And I become kind of a trusted confidant basically. And I absolutely love that. Totally loved it. So I started to do lots of angel investments. But it was a complete like serendipity, the situation, serendipity, the fact that I like helped him like that because it was completely organic. And then luckily, there was like a syndicate, like a fund/syndicate of operators in the US that wanted to start in the UK in Europe, and so I joined them as like we put together a small vehicle on angel list backed by operators. At the same time, I was a partner at Blossom, but I was doing pre-seed angel checks, and then I was doing Blossom, and so I got the opportunity to do like 22 angel investments, $50K checks into pre-seed companies. By a matter of repeating this like hopping playbook, which is the in-house VC playbook, I actually realized that need was not just Johnny's, right? That like there were many founders that had great products, but like didn't know how to raise. They had great backgrounds, great products, they know how to raise. And that from a position of an angel, I could help them manage that. And at the same time, I was at Blossom writing quite large checks in a very competitive Series A market. And this, to your point, is when, again, I looked at it and I was like, wait. So there is a market opportunity for the in-house VC, because I'm seeing that there is value in connecting founders with investors, in helping founders navigate that situation, and in after the round becoming kind of a safe place for founders because you're small, so they can really trust you. You're non-threatening, you're not scary, but you know how the big guys think. And two, I was like, I absolutely love it. Like, I was like, this thing is like I love to build those relationships with founders and with investors because I got to collaborate with all my friends instead of competing with them. And so I started to think, can you build a fund model around it, right? It was quite contrarian back then in the sense that it was the time, very competitive market, funds were getting much larger, everybody was so stake driven, right? Fund theory says you care about ownership stake. You need ownership stake. If not, numbers don't work. And so I was like, wait, but if I want to collaborate, I can't care about ownership stake. This is where the angel part comes in, right? I need to write small checks that have no friction, and I want to not care about the percentage I own, because if I need 15%, it's you or I. It's never going to be both of us together. So I can't have 15% requirement or the whole thing breaks. And so I actually basically realized that if you keep the fund size very small, you can afford being flexible on ownership stake. An ownership stake, and this is getting into fund theory, but it's always going to matter because math is math, but it matters less. It's less critical the smaller the fund size. And that is how I actually started a fund, became kind of a founder, complete serendipity. I wasn't optimizing for being a founder by then. I thought I was an investor, not a founder, but I saw that opportunity. I saw that value proposition that worked. I saw that market opportunity, that fund model. I was like, I want to do it, even if it's completely contrarian to your point, even if it's going from a large fund to a tiny fund, from being a VC to being a business angel, which is smaller in the cap table, more irrelevant officially, so to say, even if it goes from competing and winning by competing to collaborating. I was like, this is what I'm good at, this is what I want to do, and the only way is to start it myself. And so that's the origin of Cocoa.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would agree with the irrelevant part, because it's smaller in size, but in terms of the binary outcome of a business, I would probably not be on the irrelevant word. But
I agree, but I call it the power of small. I think it's a different type of power, but officially, officially on paper, you're less relevant. I agree that the relationship that you build with the founders, because of being small, allows you to actually have a big impact, and that's what I enjoy. But it's true that from the kind of framework that we kind of typically are taught of, like the bigger the better. Whereas I'm like, oh no, power of small.
You've talked already a little bit about the differences in terms of the ownership and kind of the relationship of trust and collaboration. So maybe we could talk a little bit about, the topic you alluded to when we talked about Morgan Stanley, the killers with a heart. you're big on brands that customer love and these killers with a heart. Can you talk a little bit more, especially like why do you go after brands that customer love as a definition?
Basically, Cocoa's investment thesis has like three big pillars, which is killers with a heart, which is founders who are obsessed. You need to be crazy to want to do this, and you need to be obsessed with solving the problem. Ambition that is borderline naive but not delusional. That's a fine line. I measure it with speed of execution or speed of learning. Like, I think that you need to be naive in your ambition, but ability to execute on the challenges when they come. And third, clarity of mind, clarity of vision, right? So that's a killer with a heart. That's what I like to back. Killers with a heart going after a very painful business and or consumer pain point. That's the important thing. More than market size, more than I look at pain points, business and consumer pain points, and then in a market and with a model basically that there's no structural impediment to building a big business. So that's kind of my pre-seed framework. Things that I look at to test it. Customer love is one. Sometimes there is no customer love because there's no product, and that's where the pain point comes across. I want to understand how badly people want that product. But when there is a product, and I have invested in many companies, I love products that are almost cold for people. Because when you manage to create a community around your product, you manage to create a sense of belonging around your brand. That is a great driver of organic, i.e. scalable, also growth, and of a defensibility barrier, because people want to be part of your tribe. They want to associate with your brand. They're going to be your ambassadors, and they're going to stick around. And I'll give you two examples because this can happen B2C and B2B. So I invested into a company called SideQuestVR.com. It's basically the biggest content platform of VR in the world. And it's a marketplace of developers and people who have like VR headsets and go for content. They nearly have everybody on that platform. Like, people are crazy about it. Like, there's forums, there's Discord, but also what's interesting from a business scalability perspective is when you actually think in a world where there's so much capital and actually AI has even brought down the barriers of who can build what, competition is like everywhere. Now, when you think about SideQuest, who else can come and build a new market? What are the incentives that you need to give to developers and to Oculus users to move to a different platform? They already have everything they want there. It's pure network effects. They're there because the content is there and everybody wanted to be there. Like, it's completely defensible. And that's a very, very magic, I think. And you look at things that I remember first time I spoke to Orla and Shane, the founders, they had 400,000 monthly active users. Now they have millions, engaging all the time. I don't know how many times people were like logging in and playing with it and talking to each other, building tutorials for each other to use it, like wearing merch of the company, like all this emotional attachment with a product. And another example is a company called eventstore.com, which is pure B2B data infra. A lot of the team is made out of people who came across the open source project, were so blown away that they wanted to join the team to make sure that more people would have access to this product. Like that, from a customer and a talent perspective, to create that customer love is so powerful to scale a business, which is one of the most challenging kind of parts of ending up being successful. And so that's what I try to look at, kind of DD.
Thank you for sharing that. And the investment thesis, I think it's always a thing. We haven't had a ton of women investors in the podcast. We had a few this series. People never look at women with that perspective or even get that much into it, right? Because the VC is always this very dark place that you don't know how to look at. One of the things I have been very passionate about is to bring more women into investing, even if in small amounts, or supporting. And I personally do support in entrepreneurship the women. You mentioned to me before that, and I saw it in some of your other interviews. You have this microfund approach, and you have already talked about the power of a small scale. So can you talk a little bit about why you decided to do it that way? And I think you also mentioned that, you even didn't take as much money as you were offered, which is a bit, again, contrarian to what people think is the way to go. Maybe can you run us through how you thought about it and about this access to investing and how you're putting that together? And with the scale idea, because, everybody thinks the bigger, the better.
It was almost a consequence of what I wanted to build, right? Like, if I wanted to be the in-house VC for the founder, I needed to be small, non-threatening. The point is writing checks, in the case of Cocoa, 250 to 500K, that added no friction. That was gonna make sure that I could get into any company that I wanted without any friction, and I was gonna get not to compete and like I could collaborate with other funds, and also I could get into the companies from a position that allowed me to build unique relationships of trust with founders. Those are the two things I knew I wanted to do. I wanted to build unique trust with founders, bringing them insights from that nobody else could do from that small position, and two, collaborate with other investors, not compete, and create win-win situations for everybody, founders and investors. Now, if you do that, again, you cannot rely on ownership stake, because as soon as you rely on ownership stake, that breaks. And so my point was like, okay, how do I make sure I don't rely on ownership stake? I can write small checks and have small ownership. The size needs to be very small. And I'll get a little bit like, I'll use some math so people understand. If you have 100 million fund, we always look as a fund, and this is the difference between a physical angel, generally like a physical person who invests their money. As a fund, you look at returns in terms of fund returns. So like 3x the fund, 5x the fund. Like, so when you make an investment, you think of it as is this a potential fund returner, right? So you're gonna look at this investment and you're gonna say, okay, I'm 100 million fund. If at the end I own 10%, at exit I own 10%, this company needs to be a $1 billion company for me to make 100 million, for me to return the fund. Okay, if I own 1%, this company needs to be a $10 billion company. And the likelihood that a company is a $10 billion company is less than it is a $1 billion, right? And so as a fund, I'm gonna try to make sure I have 10% at exit, because that maximizes the probability of something being a fund returner. Or, by the way, if it eventually gets to 10 billion, I make 10 times the fund, not just one time the fund. So now, if you have a 17 million fund, which is the case of Cocoa, and I have 1% at exit, a $1.7 billion company returns the fund, which means I can afford having a 1% at exit, because I only need a company to be a $1.7 billion company. I don't need it to be a 10 billion. And so that's the lever. The size is that's why many people say your size is your fund strategy. That's where that sentence comes from. It's from the economics of a fund. And this is important for founders when they get pushed on, like, for a fund, I need 15%, I need 12%. This is the math that's behind that. And so I basically had no choice than to be small if I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And this is and actually I was very comfortable with being small, but it was more like a consequence of the thesis that I wanted to build. And then what I guess like what you need to do then, if you are going to be a micro fund, then the next step is like, okay, so I'm going to have very few resources, because the second math of funds is that you get fees, and fees are a percentage of the size of the fund. So the smaller the size, the smaller the fees. That's the biggest trade-off. You just need to be super, super efficient in how you build a fund. Because the biggest challenge, if anybody's thinking about starting a micro fund, to me, the biggest challenge is that ops, because you manage ops, because you have managed fund ops and firm ops, and the ops do have economies of scale. So larger funds benefit from that, because a 100 million fund doesn't have 10 times the ops of a 10 million fund, but it has 10 times the resources, right? So actually what you need to ensure as a micro fund is that you build it in such a way that ops don't just like suck you in, because your job is to find the best founders and support them. It's not to do ops, but ops are also needed. And so I think that that's how I thought about it. It was keep it super efficient, super simple. And so Cocoa is built on AngelList, which is like a great fund platform. And we run ops like an ops machine, basically. You know, we've built a lot of our own software. A lot of it we've built it ourselves. We have built our own CRM, we've built our own drive, like, you know, project management, because it basically dump our brain into it and just kind of execute like machines, so that you free as much space as you can for investing and portfolio support.
There's a few secrets there for people looking at it. But and you started touching on something I wanted to ask you, and it kind of goes from the investing into, said earlier on, don't want to just be the operator. And I think what not everyone realizes is that when you are running a fund or when you're investing, what are you doing, right? And so maybe if you can give us a little bit of a glimpse of your day when you think of between kind of the running of the business, the operating, and then the working with founders and advising that you already have. finding new opportunities, due diligencing new opportunities. How do you think through your time in that spectrum?
It's a very good question, and my answer is not going to be a very healthy one. How I say it, cocoa is both the joy of my life and the hardest thing I've ever done. And the fact that it's the joy of my life doesn't mean it's not hard. And the fact that it's hard doesn't mean it's not the joy of my life. But it's very hard because to get something off the ground is really, really hard. Because the day only has 24 hours, sorry. And the week has 27. It's a work in progress. It's my biggest kind of area to optimize but how I think about it is my priorities need to be find the best companies to support those companies in anything they need, and third, to actually build as much knowledge as I can so that I can judge better and I can support better. Now, there are other things, to your point, that are not going to make cocoa the best fund in the world, but that can break cocoa. And so they need to be done, and they need to be done well, even if they're not going to be kind of your core revenue center. And that includes the fund ops, fund regulatory compliance, right? All the like banking, accounting of the fund and the company. Even like we travel all the time, right? Because part of finding the best companies means seeing the best companies, means being in front of mine. So I travel like crazy. And so buying those flights, managing the expenses. This is what nobody tells you you're actually going to be doing. And so how do I do it? And again, this is not the healthiest, is during the actual day, I optimize for the three things, as in finding the companies, meeting those companies, supporting the companies, and then building knowledge. That's my actual kind of working day. Everything else goes on the night and the weekends. Because again, it's not critical.
It's your second job.
But because it's not what's going to make cocoa succeed or not succeed, but it has to happen, right? Now, hope is there. First of all, one thing that was very useful to me is I was very clear in my expectations. I knew this was going to be like that, right? I've seen it at home. I've seen people get things off the ground. I had no rosy expectation of this being a walk in the park. Like I knew it was going to be incredibly hard. And so actually, it doesn't feel emotionally hard, because I'm doing it because I want to. It's my choice. Nobody's forcing me. I like it. And I knew it was going to be like that. So I never expected it to be like, super, work-life balance. I'm just going to chill on the weekends because I'm my own boss. And therefore, it's not hard. And actually, the person who's most impacted by this is my husband. And we sat down when I decided I wanted to do cocoa. And we did expectations, and he's mega supportive because we both knew what we were getting into and decided that's what we wanted, right? And I think that's useful for founders to also understand that the beginning is just brute force. Like it is literally brute force. Now, 2.5 years into it, because I ran all these ops processes myself, I actually design them. Now I have somebody who joined me to execute on them. And so it gets better in the sense that now I have much more time to free it for investing, portfolio, and building knowledge, and also supporting or managing investors. I still do the strategy of those processes. I still oversee them, but I'm not the one doing expenses at 2 a.m. And so it gets better. It's just a question of setting up the machine. I was actually, it made me smile. I don't have kids, but a friend of mine has kids, and she was telling me what they tell you the years are like the worst kind of thing. And they say it's from 1 to 3. After 3, you start seeing the light a little bit. I was like, oh my God, it's saving the distances. But the company is the first 3 years are brute force, complete brute force. And then there starts to be a little bit of emotion that, without you kind of brute forcing it, actually moves ahead, and you still have to work a lot, but things move. And so I think that because I love it so much and I knew it was gonna be like that, it hasn't been hard for me physically, sure, but not emotionally. But yeah, pretty much Cocoa is a life project.
So let's now, we've talked about the different stages. So maybe I invite you to kind of look back and reflect a little bit as you look through the different stages of your career. Do you see a common line in the way you work?
So funny. The line looks like, not in the way you work, but the line of the way it looks like that. I've thought about this.
Not that line.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about the superpowers. I think up until I knew what I wanted to do, I was trying to optimize for learning as much as possible as a professional while keeping as many doors open as possible. Like that's like what banking does to you. That's like, and once I knew I wanted to be an investor, like then I didn't need to keep any more doors open. I could just like, go through the door. And then it was about where am I gonna be the best investor, which is not necessarily what we always think. And going back to the bigger the better, right? Like if I think about what convention says that the bigger the fund, the better, that you win against others by competing, that it's IQ, it's intellectual coefficient, what like is kind of winner. If you actually think about my journey from VC to angel, it says from big to very small, competing to collaborating. To me, I win when I create win-win situations. I don't need to win against anybody. IQ to EQ. But this is all a journey in the sense that for me, my brains were my condition of self-worth. I got such good grades. I studied so much. I was like, I like to be the smart, not like to just feel, not like feel smart. It was a condition of self-worth. And then suddenly with Cocoa, it's not that I sell being not smart. That's not the point. But my value proposition to founders, the thing that I do that not others maybe can do is I'm a safe place to them. I want to be their trusted confidant. And that is much more EQ than IQ. And accepting that my superpowers were in creating win-win situations, not in winning against anybody, were in EQ and not IQ, and that required to be small. That was a journey of acceptance. But actually you realize once you do that when you build on top of what you're really good at, like it's so much more powerful because you can be so much more differentiating. You can be so much more genuine and so much more authentic. And the world sort of rewards that, which was my learning, basically, which is fascinating because it's so much more fun to be that. And then the world rewards that. And on that note, actually, because I've been very passionate about superpowers for a long time, there was a post like last year or so of a Not So Boring post that he writes very good posts, but he has a fantastic one about focus on your superpowers. Like he tells the story of his teacher who was carving pumpkins. He had the world championship in carving pumpkins, and the guy was like, well, I wish my superpower was to operate hearts, but it's not, and it's carving pumpkins, but I'm the best in carving pumpkins and I love to carve pumpkins. And the whole thing is, in a world of AI where anything that can be copied, anything that is average is going to get completely commoditized. Like find what is your superpower, differentiate yourself, be yourself, and that is going to make you actually much more powerful. So I guess that was the kind of common thread and common learning in my career is it's all about superpowers, accept them, embrace them, build on top of them. You're gonna have a much better time and you're gonna be in a much better place.
Yeah, I think your common line being the superpowers, but actually funny enough, that's also your point of difference between your careers because your superpowers changed and evolved. Is it on a bit of a different note, what challenges do you think you faced as a woman investor, specifically as a woman in this space, if any?
It's a good question. To be honest, I'm gonna start by saying I'm very lucky. I haven't felt kind of direct and like game-changing in a negative way discrimination. I think we all have felt what's more like a cultural, like not on purpose of just like sometimes certain comments, sometimes like because it's like culture ingrained into people's assumptions, but none of that. I think as a woman investor, you need a bit of more of a hard skin than you do as a man investor. But I haven't had any situation in which that has negatively impacted my career. I have had a couple of situations that have got me like, annoyed, but like not now. It's a bit different my case in the sense that I also started a fund and I don't have kids, so I can't talk about a game-changing moment in which also like that impacts a lot in terms of career progression and everything. I can't speak about that because I haven't gone through it yet. To be honest, I've been very lucky. I know of other situations, but I've been very lucky. What I would say though that has been really good about being a woman is that in Europe, we have this amazing squad of women investors, proportionally small versus like the rest of like investor universe, but so supportive. Like we support each other so much. Like we meet for dinner lunch every month. Sorry, we support each other like on WhatsApp. We help. Like it's actually, I'm so lucky. I'm a woman investor in Europe because of the, not disregarding the difficulties and difficulties that other women have much more than I have experienced so far, but just because of that kind of supporting squad that I have access to, it's actually like wonderful.
That's great. So maybe let's move a little bit more to the Carmen besides the investor. Though I do feel like the Carmen investor is very much like the Carmen person at this point. What does a good day look like for you?
I would start the day very early, as I do. I do Pilates, and I walk down Hampstead High Street and get my favorite bagels, which arrive warm, like first. Then I have time to read news and posts, because again, I do think that, like, you need to feed the library in your head and to be able to not miss things. I have a day in which I meet really strong founders that I want to work with. I think that if you think about venture, we meet thousands of founders, and sometimes it becomes a little bit like, draining to meet so many people, the energy it takes. But then you meet this founder that you just get obsessed about, like, and that feeling, that high is like, powers, like it charges the batteries like crazy. So that would be definitely one factor. The other would be, I get very high of creating these win-win situations, which can be like helping a founder with the round by connecting him to or her to another investor, or supporting a cocoa portfolio company in a way that's a little bit off kind of what was expected. Ultimately actually connecting to great people so that they can go on, create value by themselves, but you've sort of kicked that off. I always get like highs on that, and when I can do that during the day, that's also a great day. And then I love hosting, very Spanish of mine, but I host like a dinner, an event, I feed people, very key. But it's mainly like share a great experience with them. I actually, it's always a good day when I organize a dinner I live in a house in London that's called the Tower Cottage, because it's actually a tower. It's tiny, but it's like Hansel and Gretel's home. It's like a tower cottage, and it has a tower, and it has a fireplace. And so I do these dinners in the kitchen table by the fireplace, and it's like 8-10 people, and we just like eat and talk, and it's like this kind of being the friends home, like, for people, and connecting people, new people, discussing. I think that always makes a good day. And then I read a book at night. That's my, just define the actual perfect day for me.
You need to put that on the wall, as in, what's my perfect day like?
Totally, day mission. This is like from the Pilates and the bagels to the read a book, everything in between.
Exactly. And you're clearly very positive and very energetic. What helps you keep a positive attitude?
I'm obsessed. Like, I actually used to think that being obsessed was like a bad thing, and I would like not use the word, or like a scary thing. And then I listened to a podcast of Chris Sacca, in which I think it was Harry Stebbings interviewing him. But basically he goes, it's like, in this industry, in order to make it, you need to be obsessed. And that just sort of legitimized. I was like, okay, so I can just say it. And I think it's like,
and it's okay.
Totally. Like, but I think that's actually why I get away. Like, my husband's so supportive, my parents, is because they see I absolutely love it. Like, I love it more than eating with my hands. Like, to be able to like meet these founders, support these founders, like, so much fun. And so like I can be so myself that actually it's just like sort of self-powering. Now, I guess it's the fact that, yeah, I have fun. Now, I will share a trick I do, because obviously, by the way, it doesn't mean it's always rosy. There are many fires, there are many tough situations, there are many stressful situations. And I have this trick. When I was interviewing for Morgan Stanley and all the investment banks, somebody told me, the most important thing that you have to do in this interview, and those interviews are, as you know, like literally 3 days of like back to horror. It's like a marathon, and you're 19, or it's like, and this 1922 or so. And so this person told me, it's like, you just need to go there and think, I'm gonna have fun. And you need to be in that meeting and have fun, because a lot of what these people are looking and assessing is whether they want to work with you at 2 a.m. and they're a lot of stress. And so the energy that you project, how you enjoy that, it's gonna kind of embrace them. And so this was 11 years ago, 12 years ago, and still to this day, before any important meeting, I go to the bathroom. It's just a mirror. It doesn't have to be a bathroom, but it needs to be a mirror, generally in the bathroom. And I literally tell myself, go have fun. And I come into a meeting thinking I'm just gonna have fun. And regardless of the meeting, there's some very tough meetings, right? But like, it's just like, I'm just gonna have fun and I'm gonna enjoy. And I told my husband when he was my boyfriend years ago, and also we have this tradition. Every time that happens, I have to send him a picture. And so I actually, it's not the mirror anymore. I send him a picture being like, he's full of like selfies of like, have fun. And it's just this reminder before you go into anything that's important, it is to remind yourself, let's go enjoy. Because the energy that you're gonna bring to everybody else is just gonna help you so much.
I think we underestimate the importance of enjoyment, and to just have joy out of something, and how that's sometimes viewed as a little bit of a bad thing, because we were all meant to be serious and having difficult conversations. So you clearly got some really good advice when you started your career. But what advice would you give yourself to the Carmen 11 years ago when you started?
I would tell myself, it's not a straight line. It's all about superpowers. Like, be genuine, be authentic, be yourself. Don't be afraid of being yourself and have fun. And actually, I'll tell you one moment where I started to stress less about the fact that it was not a straight upward line. I was reading an article years ago. I was reading an article in the New York Times about a guy called John Goodenough. John Goodenough had won a massive prize for physics for the lithium batteries. Like the guy's like, by then he was like 89 or so, like a complete eminence. And the New York Times made an article on him because John Goodenough started physics very late, at the age of 28, when other people already had their PhDs, everything. And so everybody was telling him, look, like, you're too late. You're not gonna make it. Like, it's too late, way too late. And he eventually made it, was one of the key contributors to lithium batteries, like got massive prizes. And he has this quote that says, some of us are turtles, like we crawl and we struggle along and we haven't maybe figured it all out by the time that we're 30. But the turtles keep on walking. And here's the key that like stuck with me is like, you have to draw on a fair amount of experience in order to be able to put ideas together. Like cocoa wouldn't have been, like I wouldn't have come up with cocoa if I wouldn't have gone through a lot of this experience, if I wouldn't have been at Blossom writing large checks and at the same time writing $50K small checks. It wouldn't have happened if I was 25 instead of 30, confident in the fact that I could do something that was a little bit contrarian. Like, it's just like some things take time, but they take a fair amount of experience, right? And I think that like, if somebody would have told me 12 years ago or 15 years ago, I would have been much more relaxed about it. And then the other thing that was in this article, which also stuck with me, is moving around is not lack of focus. It's called entrepreneurial spirit. I was like, oh, okay, so I don't have lack of focus. I'm just an entrepreneur.
I love that. That is a perfect one to change the way you look at it. So our time is coming up. So I'm gonna have three very fire round questions for you. And then the first one should be easy because you say you're a good day. You always read. So is there a book you'd like to recommend to the audience?
Oh my God, there's so many books. I have my mom to thank for being a very avid reader. I also get all the curation because she reads constantly, so she sends me all the good things. But I'll give a couple. In venture, I have this rule. I only read novels at night, like fiction, no joke. I read enough about work during the day. But Venture One, The Power Law, like it's just like a very easy, accessible way of understanding how venture works and the story of venture through companies and people. So it's very easy to read. So The Power Law. Like, and novel-wise, most recent, probably it's one called Silence into the Night. This is very, like, I could recommend a million ones, but Silence into the Night is a book written by a journalist in Italy about his father, who in the 70s, when the communists and the fascists were fighting each other and assassinating each other, got unfairly accused of killing somebody and killed himself. And it's a story of how his family basically learned to live with the memory but also without hate, and how you rebuild a country like through that, and the will to live and not to hate and not to like stay that even if your father is killed when you're 5 and your mother is pregnant and the whole thing. And it's just such a beautiful kind of tribute to life, and it's very so that's like it's Silence into the Night, I believe.
All right, I gotta put that in the notes. Is there a quote that you are particularly inspired by, or live by, or want to share?
Yes, absolutely. Many quotes, but I'll share one that might not be the most kind of professional one, but one that has been with me since boarding school, because my parents were wise enough to send me to a boarding school which motto was function in disaster, finish in style. And so that quote has come with me. I just didn't know at the age of 13 how relevant it was gonna be in all my life. I try to minimize the function in disaster the older I become. I guess like the point there is, if you do your thing, if you work hard, if you put your heart into everything, even if functioning sometimes is in disaster because they're very uncontrollable, you generally finish instead.
So my last one is, do you have a word of the year for 2024?
Growth. We had our team offsite. I was like, 2024 is growth for hopefully everybody, like professionally and personally. I think 2023 was a really hard year because it was a lot of grinding, walking in the mud without a feeling of like actually going upwards, and that for a whole year after us, the second year after hard. And I think 2024 will be a lot of work, but it's hopefully gonna feel like growth.
That's aligned with I didn't know that's aligned with the podcast, given we're make space for growth here. So it's a good one for us to start the year. It's the perfect one. Carmen, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing and for giving us all the knowledge and all the insights. I really appreciate it, and all the best that this year does turn out to be full of growth and full of fun.
Thank you so much. I had a great time. Thank you for having me.
I think you can tell by the voices and faces, if you're watching us on video, that this podcast was most enjoyable. In fact, joy is one of the key reasons why I do this podcast. I get so much joy hearing about the lives of amazing women entrepreneurs and I think about their careers and businesses. I'm the news, but I'm also drawn to reflect on what each person shares and how I can learn into my own life. What did you learn today? Stay tuned for this journey of exploration through 2024. Drop me a review or a note at any time. Until the next time, I get to do this. This podcast has been produced by Alice Stansfield, all rights reserved.